This is the Worst Podcast Ever by Dean Schofield. This podcast is for a capstone project at Brigham Young University, Idaho, for the purpose of helping others acquire the taste of the German culture and language through interviews of students, professors, and friends of the host. Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Worst Podcast Ever. This week I'm going to be conducting a phone interview with my friend, colleague, teacher, boss, whatever you want to call him, Brian McDermott. He is one of the best teachers I've ever had up here on campus at Brigham Young University, Idaho. And he also had to hire me on as a TA, as a teacher assistant. And he and I were teaching German together for about a year until the program got closed down. And it was great being with him. He is one of the best people I've ever met in my life. He was a great teacher. He spoke plainly, he taught amazingly, and he spent a lot of his life in Germany as well, a lot of his adult life in Germany. And with that, we are going to do a idiom of the week before we actually get to the phone interview. And this is a expression about sausage, and it is "Das ist mir Wurst." And what that means is it's all the same to me. It's all sausage. I explained on another podcast that they have, a million different ways of presenting a sausage, and it's basically just whatever it is, it's all the same. It's all just Wurst. And with that, here's the interview. So Brian, thanks for being here. Go ahead and give us a quick introduction of who you are and your background.
Okay, so I'm Brian McDermott. I'm from Rigby, Idaho, and I was called to serve an LDS mission in Germany from 2007 to 2009. And before I went to Germany on my mission, I didn't know if I was, first of all, I didn't know if I was going to serve a mission. And second of all, I didn't know if I was even going to go to college. I was just planning on just becoming a weight trainer and living in my little town and calling it good. But then I went on my mission, and I served in the Frankfurt mission, and I served in, so it was like southwestern Germany. And I served in Heidelberg for, about 4.5 months. I was in Frankfurt for 6 months, and I was in Aachen, Aachen, which is right on the Dutch and Belgian border. I was there for 9 months, and I was in a place called Wurst. It's called like worms. I was there for 6 months, and while I was there on my mission, I realized, one, I liked learning another language and learned about a whole other group of people and culture and their history and things like that. And I realized that I was good at it, and it kind of like came, not to say it was easy for me, but it came naturally to me, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And so during my mission, I realized that I liked teaching and that I was good at teaching, and that I liked learning a language, and that I was good at learning a language, a foreign language. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of what led me to, after my mission, I got my general associate's degree from BYU, Idaho, just in general studies, and then I went to Utah State, where I majored in German, and then after my mission, I also studied Spanish, and so I got a minor in Spanish, and I also got a minor in linguistics. And then after graduating from Utah State, I went and studied at the University of Heidelberg, and I studied German studies and cultural comparisons with a focus in linguistics. And I also did, I guess they call it Romanistic, but it's like Romance language studies, and mine was Spanish, in cultural comparisons with a focus in linguistics. And so then I lived in Germany for 3 years with my wife, and I was the only American in my program, so I was with Germans. There were some other foreign students, but it was mostly me and a few other foreign students, and then the majority was probably German. Mm-hmm. And all my courses were either in German or in Spanish, respectively. And then after my master's degree, I taught German at BYU, Idaho for 2 years, where I taught just shy of 70 credits. And then I just started a PhD program in language and literacy education at the University of Georgia, and I'm almost finished with my second semester, and my emphasis is TESOL, so teaching English to speakers of other languages, and world language education, so teaching someone German or teaching someone Spanish for my case.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of a long-winded way of saying where I come from.
No, it's
What
okay.
I do.
It's completely okay. You actually kind of answered like a lot of the questions that I had already, so I mean that's pretty good. So,
Okay.
it's all right. And one of the questions that I had was, and this is not on the script that I have for this podcast, but how difficult was it for you to, or what made you decide that you wanted to become a teacher here on campus for the time that you were?
Yeah, so while I was studying in Germany, my wife was with me, and she's also from Rigby, Idaho, just a little town right outside of Rexburg. And she had taken a break from her studies, essentially, to come to Germany with me. She was doing some online classes, but she couldn't do all of her courses online. She got her bachelor's in public health from BYU, Idaho. So I knew that I needed to return to Rexburg anyways so that she could finish her studies. It was only fair. I took her away from her studies for like 3 years. And so she had 2 years left at BYU, Idaho. And so really the stars aligned. And when I was getting close to graduating with my master's, I reached out to Idaho State University, which is at Pocatello, which isn't that far from where we're from. And I reached out to BYU, Idaho, and just said, hey, this is who I am. I'm getting my master's in what I just told you guys. Are there any positions available for me to be able to teach? And ISU gave me a hard no, but BYU Idaho said, well, actually, there's a spot opening up for a visiting assistant professor of German. And so I was like, oh, perfect. And so I had a Skype interview, so I hurried and shaved my beard off before the interview, had the Skype interview, and then they said they really liked me. And so then they flew me out to Rexburg, which is kind of funny because, like, I'm from that area.
Yeah.
But, like, they paid for me. I flew out there. I just stayed at my in-laws' house. And I flew there, which takes pretty much a whole day to fly. Pretty much the very next day, I had so many interviews, and they had me teach a beginning level German course. And all they told me before I taught was, they just said, teach the dative case. And so, like, I prepared my stuff prior in Germany before coming. I had all my stuff ready. I had all these crazy interviews. All these professors from BYU Idaho watched me teach. And then they said they'd let me know, and I flew back to Germany. And then after a while, they let me know that I got the position. So then we packed up our stuff and moved back home, essentially. We just lived at my wife's parents' house. They were on their mission. It worked out perfectly because we could stay in their house. They were on their mission, and I could teach at BYU Idaho for 2 years, and that was the exact same amount of time my wife needed to finish her degree. So everything just worked out perfectly.
Literally, all the stars just aligned for you.
Once I was finished, she was finished, and then I could come here to pursue my doctorate degree.
Right, and that's pretty crazy. Did you have any competition when you had to actually come here and apply to be a teacher?
So they weren't telling me who the other candidates were, but I made friends with one of the, I made friends, multiple friends in the program, but the best friend that I made, he told me about some other guy that had applied for the job, and they must have liked him enough that they also brought him out. But he said that he was pretty eccentric, like seemed like a guy that really loved, from what I understood, like weird little nooks and crannies of German stuff, like, I don't know, medieval German literature from like this one little time period in this weird genre or whatever. And to boot, the guy had a huge beard. And my friend told me, he's like, when we saw that guy, we just thought, does this guy not know where he is? And so for me, like, my master's was in German studies, and I actually had an emphasis, they call it a Schwerpunkt, in pedagogy, so teaching. And so mine was more, my background was more fitted to what they wanted, just teaching German, not, talking about, I don't
medieval
know,
culture and all that stuff.
the romantic and whatever. Mine was like, my background was just more general on how to teach German. So that's the only other, I don't know if they brought anyone else, but that's the only other person I heard about that had applied for the job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, and with your experience teaching and learning, I would say, what would be the hardest thing that you found that was to teach German? And what was the hardest thing that you had to learn when you actually learned the language? Did you, and did you know anything about, like, did you learn any German at all before you went to Frankfurt on your mission?
Yeah, so I had a little bit of German in high school, and I don't know why, but I always kind of thought Germany was really cool, like in high school and stuff. And I was friends with a German exchange student and things. And so, I mean, I had a tiny bit before I went, but not much. Actually, my German friend, the German exchange student, I remember him doing my homework for me before in German so we could go hang out. So I didn't really learn much in high school because I pulled dumb stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I mean, I did the same thing. Like when I took 2 years, I took 2 years in high school, and I had several exchange students who were my friends, on soccer and just in general.
Yeah.
And so if I had questions, I'd usually ask them, but I'd try to do my best and actually like try to learn and stuff. So
yeah, mine was more like, I remember at least one time him being like, dude, let's go hang out. And I said, oh, I have homework. And he said, what subject? And I said, German. He's like, dude, give me it. He takes it and does it in like 5 minutes. And then we went and hung out. So that was on me. That was on me. So I could have learned more prior, but I really didn't know much before my mission.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was the same way. Like I got up to, I would say, I learned up to dative when I was in high school, and then as soon as I got done with high school, like I just stopped, and everyone's like, "Oh, you spoke German? I mean, you learned German in high school. You're definitely gonna go to Germany." I said, "No, there's no way." I have several friends who took German with me, who went stateside and to other places that weren't Germany. I was like, "There's always that possibility that I don't." So
right.
So
definitely.
What was the hardest thing that you found that was hard to teach about German? And what was hard to learn about it?
Yeah, so I realized I had written you an email about this prior. I said hindsight is 2020. I realized that when I taught at BYU Idaho, there were, the students that I taught were all great. The only thing that I regret a little bit is I don't think many of them continued learning German after I left. Maybe a handful. And the way that I taught was it was like heavily, I would do explicit grammar, and I was using a legacy method, which means that I was teaching the way I had been taught, like in the MTC, at the university and things, in high school even. It was like straight up explicit grammar. And from what I've been learning in my doctoral program, it's not the best way, in my opinion, because it's really hard to grasp grammar if you don't have experience in actually trying to speak. So just learning grammar cold is quite difficult. So I think because German grammar is quite difficult, that's probably the hardest part to teach. Getting kids to understand grammar principles, to understand why they're important, and then to employ them correctly. And I remember having struggles with that. I remember in high school just like not understanding the grammar and stuff. But once I started speaking it and actually using getting a basis and a basic vocabulary which I could use, then the grammar started helping me more. But like learning grammar before I could even speak, I don't think really is that helpful. And so I would just say grammar principles were the hardest to teach and the hardest to learn. And if I could do it all over again at BYU Idaho, I wouldn't do explicit grammar until the third or fourth semester.
Mm-hmm.
I just speak to them, tell them stories, make sure it's comprehensible, interesting, and I personalize it so they're interested in it. And then once they had a pool to draw from of vocabulary, then I would start to give them explicit grammar. Previous to that, I would give them implicit instruction. So if a kid said something wrong, like die Hund, I wouldn't say, no, you said it wrong. I'd just say, ach, der Hund. And I just repeat what he said without explicitly saying, dude, you dumbo, it's wrong. It's masculine. Like I would tone that back just so kids would have more confidence in what they're saying and not feel like, oh, I'm dumb, I'm like not getting it right. Not that I made kids feel dumb, but like doing it implicitly would just give them more confidence. And then come like the third or fourth semester, once they already had some vocab under their belt and stuff, then I would start saying, okay, you know what? We say it's der Hund because it's masculine, and I'd start teaching them like that. So anyways.
Yeah. And I kind of noticed that I started doing the same thing too, is it's really hard for me to, like, I'm a common person where I point out mistakes, but like I soon realized that when I became your teacher assistant, that's not a good way to teach. And so you kind of have to indirectly teach them how to notice their mistakes. And so saying die Hund, and then automatically after saying der Hund, like I remember when I was in Berlin, I said something wrong. So we're the past participle for riechen, right? To like gerochen, right. Like to smell. I remember I said it wrong, and this member just drilled me. And she's like, no, gerochen. And I was like, oh crap. Okay. So ever since that time, I immediately memorized, like I had to memorize that. And it was just really funny that she was so direct, but it wasn't more of like a, hey, Elder, great job, but here's what you did wrong. She just straight up just corrected me. And so it was really funny. Yep. Was there a principle that was really hard for you to learn when you were there?
So with what you said, of like Germans being really straightforward and kind of like tearing you a new one sometimes if you said something wrong, like I had that a lot of times. And also I found that other missionaries were like that with each other, which I really didn't like. And so, yeah, that's also why I'm realizing that implicit grammar corrections would be best. And I think the thing that I found the most difficult with learning German was probably with writing. I made friends with a lot of old German ladies, the iconic Omas, and I would write the Omas all the time on my mission and then after my mission, and that helped me with writing a lot. And during my bachelor's, I considered myself pretty darn good at writing in German, but then when I got into my master's degree, I was getting slammed, and I was like, oh dang. And so I really had to better my writing, the things that we don't really think about when we write, because writing is almost like a different language. Then when we speak, like written German is kind of different than spoken German. So I needed to, what helped me was I was in it, and I got better with time, but it was finding all the little conjunctions and things that worked the best to connect my ideas in a fluid way to express what I wanted to say. Like due to the fact that this was said, blah, 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 like due to the fact that. Yeah. Just a little something like that helped me to connect my ideas in a really good way, and just getting those type of connecting words helped my writing become a lot better. But that was probably one of the most difficult things, was when I was doing my master's and writing tons of papers, was getting those down and getting them correct and expressing myself well through writing. So. Yeah.
Well, it's even funny that even after I got done taking your class, I would continually look back at my work that I wrote for it, and I was like, oh man, I don't know how he passed me, because like I did so much stuff that was just beyond, like I learned so much from when I was your TA, and I looked back at my writing and I said, I wouldn't have passed me, it was just kind of,
compared to the other kids, you were the best one in the class by far. So.
Yeah. Well, I didn't mean to toot my own horn there, but it's just it's just something that I looked at myself. I was like, man, I improved a lot ever since I became, someone who helped you.
That's cool.
And you lived over there for quite a long time, and I know a lot of Americans, and you probably know a lot of Americans that, just have a German stereotype in their brain, What is one misconception of Germans that you think most Americans usually get wrong?
So I've lived in Germany a total of 5 years, 2 years on my mission, and then 3 years as a graduate student. And I've met a lot of Americans that live over there and things. And I think one of the biggest things is to realize that Germany is a country with a ton of people. And they have, over, 80 million people. Yeah. And it's easier for us to just say, oh, all the Germans are like this, or all the so-and-sos are like this, and we kind of pigeonhole them into say they're a certain way. And so in general, I do agree that Germans are more direct and maybe a little more standoffish when you first meet them, but And I think that a lot of Americans think that, but then they let that perception hold them back from getting to know Germans. And I know a lot of Germans. I'm friends with a ton of Germans, obviously, because I lived over there and things. And I know some Germans that are really open and kind and really just soft people. Like one of my best friends who's a German guy, he's like really kind, open, warm, friendly person. And if you were trying to pigeonhole Germans, you'd look at that guy and you'd say, that guy's not German. Like if you like couldn't hear what language he was speaking or whatever, you'd be like, that guy is like Italian or like from Spain or something. Mm-hmm. But it's just that. So first and foremost, Germany has so many people and they're all different. And so like pigeonholing them, like seeing like making general observations can help to a point, but don't use it as a way to think that that's how they all are, and don't use it as a way to generalize and prejudge Germans before you meet them. Like, oh, that German's just going to be mean to me, so I'm not even going to open up and talk to him, because you never know if they're going to be like that or not. Like the example with my friend.
Mm-hmm. No, I definitely agree. Like, I met so many people over there who would be completely different than the stereotype that I had in my head. And I mean, that's just kind of the bad thing about stereotyping in general. I guess if we want to make this a lesson, is like it's bad to just have an image in your head of someone who isn't who they say they are, and then you actually get to know them and realize that they are completely different than what everyone has said them to be, you know?
Right.
So,
totally.
Are there any habits that you had in Germany that you still kind of practice today in the United States?
Yeah, so I did meet a lot of Germans that are very direct, and just how I am naturally, I used to be more of kind of a roundabout. I'd say things in like a roundabout way because I wouldn't want to hurt people's feelings. But I did a lot of my Germans, which were the typical to the point and telling you how it is. I learned from them a lot, and I've incorporated that into my own life, like added with how I was initially. So trying to find the sweet spot between being direct but not being a jerk about it.
Right.
But I am definitely more direct than I was before I lived over there, I think to my benefit. But I've also still kept how I am, that I don't want to hurt people's feelings and things, but I can be direct at the same time.
Right.
And, you know, sometimes I do better than in other times, but I feel that that's really helped me. I learned how to have better table etiquette. Like I eat like the Germans ever since my mission, like with the knife in the hand and the fork, and I cut my stuff up and eat it instead of just the weird American way of
just digging in like
a fork
carnivore.
And trying to cut everything with a fork.
Yeah.
Like, so my table manners definitely got a lot better from living with the Germans. I think that I've loosened up a little bit, but I used to really adhere to their punctuality mentality, where if someone was even just a little bit late, they'd get really upset and take it as a sign of disrespect. And I did learn that from them, but I've learned to tone it down a little bit, because I can tell myself, hey, I'm in the U.S. now, and it's okay if someone's a little bit late. It's not like they're blatantly trying to slap me in the face and show me disrespect.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it living over there did help me to realize the importance of being on time. And so, and I'm not perfect, but I try my darndest to be on time. But I've also learned to take it easy if someone is late, especially here in the States, because it's not the same norm as in Germany of like being like a big disrespect if you're late.
Right. Yeah, I'm pretty much the same way. So that's pretty much all the questions that I got, and I think we'll end the recording. Thanks a lot for the interview.
Yep, appreciate it.